Hello, Tinna. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
And now I mentioned your name, Tinna. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yes, I'm a diversity, equity, inclusion expert. I've worked with this for about 20 years by now. I'm also an anthropologist and a designer applying behavioral science insights. And I'm the founder of a change organization called Move the Elephant for Inclusiveness. And I'm also the co-founder of an empowerment initiative called Inclusion Nudges, which is also a behavioral design methodology to create effective change.
And Tinna, based on 20 years of experience in this field, can you tell us a little bit about why is it so hard to go from intention when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion to actual implementation?
Well, actually, the very simple answer is that there are a lot of stuck patterns that we stick to. And also the way the human mind works has a huge impact on this, because the part of the brain that is really dominating our behavior and the decisions we make it has really not evolved that much. We'd like to think of ourselves as really rational human beings making well-informed decisions and behaving accordingly to our values and intentions. But the fact is, that's not the case. So actually, a lot of the things we do is based on some mental shortcuts, familiar patterns, a tribe mentality we have that makes us have a natural preference for similar others and things we recognize. And that means that in a split second, we jump to conclusions, and these are often flawed conclusions. That means it influences who we hire into our organizations. It influences in innovation or design processes. It really influences how much we tend to process the information coming from people. And the information we process the most is from people we recognize as competent. And that in itself is a science, what makes our brain jump to conclusions very fast on that.
And then, of course, as a response to this, or as a kind of like guideline, you developed the inclusion nudges, which was why I really wanted to talk to you today, of course. Could you tell us a bit about what are the inclusion nudges?
Inclusion nudges is really applying the whole theory around behavioral economics and nudging, which is becoming more familiar now, and also combining that with a really deep insight and knowledge and expertise around diversity, equity, inclusion, race, sexism, and all those issues related to that. Back in 2013, I met Lisa Kapinski, who is also another global change maker I joined forces with. At the time, we were both working inside big multinational organizations. And when you work in this line of work, you're very often alone. You don't have a big budget. You don't have a huge team, but yet you have maybe 20,000 people. You have to become more inclusive of diversity and, change behavior and the culture and the systems. And it's like pushing water uphill, really. So we started systematically applying nudging and behavioral economics and behavioral design, and redesigning the processes and the practices and the systems so it would become, so inclusion really would become the norm and the default. So it would be something everybody automatically would do without having to convince them or talk about it all the time. So it's very action oriented. Lisa and I were both doing that without knowing each other. When we joined forces, we could see similar patterns in how we approached this. And that then evolved into the change and behavioral design methodology that we call inclusion nudges. And that has then become something that we spread through these practical guidebooks, because what people often lack is the examples, the practical things they can do, the actions they can take in everyday life. So it doesn't have to be something that's kind of hanging out here alone that we do when we have the time. It really has to be integrated in basically everything we do. The way we talk, the way we have conversations, the way we make decisions, the way we innovate, the way we hire, just everything, basically. So yeah, that's the journey we're on, movement that is spreading globally, and it's a joy to experience that people just go do.
And now you have the inclusion nudges as a resource for people. So I think it would be really great to know, where can we find these resources to go look for ourselves and get started on the inclusion nudges?
Mm-hmm. So there's a website for the initiative. It's called inclusionnudges.org. And there's also a free blog. So every month we post new examples, and on the website, people can find 4 practical action guides. One is for like full-blown change makers with 100 examples. And there are 3 shorter action guides with 30 examples, which is targeted leadership and talent selection and motivating others to actually engage in this. It's called Motivating Allies. And actually brings us back to your point, is also about, do we actually have to, be aware of this to move on it? And yes, we do, but you can also get other people to be allies and be engaged in this agenda without having to always talk about it or always create awareness. And that's the beauty of this technique and methodology, is you can do both. It depends on, where you are and the people you meet in the situation you're in.
And my last question is, speaking of practical, do you have any kind of like one thing that you would tell our viewers that this is a thing you can go to work and you can do this tomorrow to start being on this journey to more diversity and inclusion?
Well, I think, we have so many. So on the spot, if I have to choose one, I would actually suggest that people start using default designs. And a default is, something, it's kind of like the anchor of a decision we make. And if we change that, we actually start seeing some of the hidden patterns that are driving our behavior, but it also starts opening up our mind to other solutions. So it could be, for example, if you're in a situation where you have to make a choice, you have to choose projects. Maybe you have 4 different projects you have to choose from. So instead of, talking about which of these projects or ideas are the best, you flip it and say the default is that all these ideas are the best. Now we have to find the facts for why not for each of them, because else your mind is going to go look for the familiar patterns. And then you're very high risk of ending up with the same kind of idea or something that's similar to something you've previously done, because your brain will recognize that as most competent. And you can do that when you have to select people for a team as well, right? Say everybody's qualified to be a part of that team or part of that, or have that position. And then you have to look for the facts. Why not? Or else your mind will go into confirmation bias and go like, that's the most competent. And then this is why that person is the best. So yeah, try it out. Default design is really effective behavioral designs.
Default design, that's noted down. Thank you so much, Tinna, for speaking with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.